Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game SO. Today we're going to continue the series on the MiSTerFPGA DE-10 Nano project, and today we're taking a second look at the QMTech MiSTer FPGA clone board. Because when I first talked about this, I/O boards were not available, and while it did function as a MiSTer, I didn't really think it was the most user-friendly option around, and I said you might want to hold off to see what comes out for it. Well, Antonio Villena sent me over his new I/O board as well as USB hub, so that now you can set up a QMTech board the way you want it with all of the ports in a case, and it can just function as a MiSTer. Before you get involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel some kind of want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. But Antonio's new board is absolutely amazing. It combines the USB hub and the I/O board into one device. When you put it onto the QMTech board, you're going to have a very short MiSTer stack that's going to do everything you would normally do. And that was my number one takeaway from the original QMTech board, because no I/O boards were available, was that it definitely worked. It just really didn't give you the ports and everything else you needed without a lot of different dongles. Additionally, you're going to get this USB port here that's going to tuck in. I'll explain that later. And you're also going to get a DB9 connector out to snack, and you're going to be able to use that port for other purposes as well. Just be aware that if you do want to build this, this is only for the QMTech board with the 128 megabytes of RAM soldered onto the bottom. It is not for the triple GPIO board. So if you want to build one of these things, make sure you get that 128 megabytes of RAM built in. It is the board I would recommend, definitely. You're going to see here on one side, we're going to get the two USB ports. Additionally, we're going to get that DB9 connector, and that's what Snack is going to tab out to, but it is a multi-purpose connector, so you can plug other things in there if you want from Antonio. And we can take a look all the way around this board to see everything it offers, because it is a ton of stuff. But there's another close-up look of that adapter, and I'll explain how that works in about a minute. And if we take a look at the other side of the board, you're going to see two more USB ports as well as the pin headers that we're going to plug into the QMTech board. They're really nicely fit, and it's going to be basically just press fit, so I'll show you that once we actually build this up. And you're also going to have this tactile switch here over around the corner. But again, this is so well designed. It really does fix basically everything I was not a fan of on the QMTech board, but of course there is still one more side to look at. Around this side, of course, you're going to have that VGA style connector that's going to bring your RGB out of the MiSTer FPGA, or in this instance, the QMTech clone board. You also have that headphone jack there with the LED behind it, so you can get that optical audio out like you can on any other MiSTer I/O board. And around the side here, you're going to have another headphone jack and a couple more USB ports, so you're going to have a maximum amount of USB really to do whatever you would possibly want. And that was my big thing with the QMTech board, and no I/O or USB hub. And you'll see here, as far as that snack port is concerned, it plugs right there into that DB9 connector, and you can go ahead and then plug in whatever snack adapter you want, because that's not a USB port, it is a user port now. It just uses the same connector. And there is this pin header right over here, and you'll get this tiny little USB port that connects into it. Now this is definitely a very nice touch. I actually like this. If you pop that in there, my guess would be it's intended for something like a Wi-Fi USB dongle. So long as the plastic isn't too big, you can plug it in and keep it in the case. That way you're not using one of your ports on the outside and giving it a nice clean look. Now the only other thing you need to do is up against this USB port adjacent to the Ethernet jack, there's 4 pins here. You're going to receive this very small board, and on the female end here, you're going to press down until those 2 pins on the outside edge are covered. Do it exactly as you see on the camera, that way everything is good, because the 2 male pins on the top side of this are going to marry up together with the I/O board in a moment or two. So I want you just to understand, do not forget this. You'll see these 2 male pins right here are going to go into these 2 female headers on the I/O board. The last thing you need to do to build this is remove all 4 of the screws on the QMTech board. You will not be able to press fit this if you don't take the screws out, and you won't be able to assemble it. And I can definitely see somebody making that mistake, because it's just one of those things that are already there. You don't really think about taking them off. But this is what your QMTech board should look like when you're ready to assemble. Now, the only other thing you need to worry about is the fan cable. It is relatively long, that way you can route it however you want, but it does have a slight tendency to want to get in between the GPIO headers, both female and male, and you do not want to push down on that too hard if you actually have the cable inside. I did this intentionally so you can see it. If you were to push down too hard, you're going to pierce that cable and you're going to have to rerun it. So just make sure it is tucked in between between the two boards. From there, you just want to wiggle down, taking special attention to make sure that that 2-pin header that I just showed you is going into the slot correctly. You do not want to bend that, just make sure that everything is lined up before you press down. And then once you get all of that taken care of, you will see here that the fitment between the headers, both male and female, is nice and tight on this board. On that 2 poster right there, on the 2 big banks of pins, everything is spaced out properly, everything is pinched down correctly, we are good to go. And now we can put the case together that Antonio sends with this kit. A big thanks to him for sending this out for a video, because I was chatting with him and saying that somebody needed to make a good I/O board for the QMTech, and he said he had one ready to go. And the best part is you do get this full case as well, so by the time you're done, the QMTech board can sit right next to a traditional MiSTer triple stack, and you really wouldn't be able to tell the difference. What you need to do to actually build this up is you're going to put these 4 machine threaded screws here, the longer of the 2 that come in the kit, underneath, and you'll see there Antonio Villena's name is going to be facing up. That's a good indicator as to where you want to put them. Through the magic of editing, all 4 screws are now there, and you're going to get 4 nuts as well. Just hand tighten these, do not over tighten them, or they're not going to turn when we actually put this into the QMTech board stack in a future moment. Just make sure, again, don't go Hulk strong on these things. If you haven't noticed already, this bottom plate does have a cutout, and that's going to line up with the micro SD card slot. That way you're going to have an easier time getting it off. You can totally put this on the wrong way, it's not going to break anything whatsoever. You're just going to realize that when you actually try to get that micro SD card out, it's not going to be possible, so make sure you do it this way. Let's go ahead and screw all 4 of these screws into these standoffs, and of course I didn't notice because I was on camera, my bit actually stayed behind. And when you do all that, you have that notch lined up with the micro SD card, and you make sure that the nuts aren't too tight. Everything will line up perfectly, everything will screw in, and we now have that bottom base attached. And from here we can put all of the different I/O shields on around the cases. There's going to be little notches so they drop in. It requires a little bit of wiggling because the fitment is quite tight in a good way. Once the case is built, there really aren't any gaps whatsoever, but just again, take an ounce of prevention here. Don't force things that aren't going together. If you just wiggle them back and forth ever so slightly, you will see here it drops right in, and it is perfectly spaced. We can do that around the rest of the board as well. So once you get all 4 of those side panels on, everything is going to be lined up and ready to go. Again, just don't stress it, it'll pop right in. If it does seem a little tight on one side, just back those screws on the bottom plate out like 1/8 of a turn, and everything will drop back in. If you hand tighten them a little too hard, there can be a little bit of a tolerance thing going on there, but I had no issues. You also get these 3 button extenders that are going to pop out of the top of the case, so just lightly press them on until you have everything even. That way you have the 3 buttons available. And then you're going to go ahead and take the top plate. Do be aware that it is acrylic and it is transparent, so you're going to have to take these little peels off here, and take good care not to scratch, not to get too many fingerprints on the underside of it, because once you put the sandwich together, if you've got a big thumbprint on the bottom, it's probably going to drive you nuts. So I definitely wipe this down with Windex and let it dry before I install it. And of course, those 3 button holes for the buttons are going to line up, so you really can't get this one wrong right here. Just make sure everything drops in, and then from there you're going to go ahead and tighten the 4 screws into those standoffs. Just make sure, again, don't go crazy tight. You are dealing with acrylic here. Hand tight is perfectly fine. They will fit down nicely and everything will come together, and it really does look good with that smoky black translucent plastic right there. And now everything is good to go. You can see the cases on. We now have a MiSTerFPGA built with a QMTech board with the 128 megabytes of RAM soldered in a much more usable format that you're going to be able to just put next to your television or next to your PVM and use like you would any other MiSTerFPGA. If we take a look around the sides, all of the fitment is good, the case looks nice and white, and you have everything you need to basically have a MiSTerFPGA setup for less expensive than the Terasic DE-10 Nano. The only other thing you need to do is put this Mr. X sticker on the top, and weirdly I have more experience with putting on decals than probably anybody else on YouTube. When I worked in sports, we'd have so many of these things that we'd have to put on skis, helmets, and otherwise, so just go ahead and line it up once, and once you get it on there, don't initially peel up. You need to rub this back and forth over and over again. You even want to use your fingernail just to kind of slightly scratch down to put more pressure onto that, so when you peel off this backing, everything is going to stay exactly where you want it to. If the letters are coming up, just wait a little longer, push a little bit more with your finger, use that fingernail just to kind of slightly scratch down onto it, and then you should see that the decal is going to stay exactly where it needs to be. Just don't scratch too hard, you don't want to put any marks in, but scratching over the top is going to keep that decal stuck to where it needs to, and the letter isn't going to come up. And I would say if you're applying a decal on camera, looking over the camera at a 45-degree angle, I nailed that thing pretty damn spot on. And again, I have a lot of experience with decals. It's one of my weird talents. The only other thing you need to do is put on the 4 rubber feet. I put them next to the screw, so if I need to open it up, I can. They are slightly taller than the screw, should be good to go, and these things are not going anywhere. I'm actually wiggling the table with the MiSTerFPGA, so that means if you actually pull this stack off of your TV stand or otherwise, you really tried, so don't do that for sure. And this is so much better than when I initially reviewed the QMTech board, because there was no IOs available. This was basically the overall setup that you would be using if you wanted to play it. You'd have some sort of USB hub coming off of the side, you'd have your power adapter, and you would just basically have that board there raw with nothing on it whatsoever, no matter which one you use. There really wasn't any cases, there wasn't any IO boards or USB hubs, and it seems like QMTech has been selling some of their own boards, but they seem to be out of stock every time I look. So if I can get a hold of those, I will definitely check them out on camera if you guys are interested. But again, the QMTech board just works as a MiSTerFPGA, so honestly there's no marks against it as far as its operation were concerned. It's just one of those things that without the case and the IO when I first looked at it, it wasn't something I could totally recommend. But now with this IO board, the case and everything on it from Villena, it 100% is a great addition to the MiSTerFPGA ecosystem that can stand right alongside Taki Udon's Mr. Pi and a traditional Terasic triple stack as well. That's the great thing about these projects. There's more ways to play MiSTer, there's cheaper ways to play MiSTer, and the only wrong way is to not play it at all. See you guys next time. Bye bye.